Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billahil aliyyil azim. Allahumma aftah alayna hikmataka wanshur alayna min khazaini rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. Welcome to the Friends of Islamization FOIS Study Circle. I am Dr. Nurjana Hassan speaking today from CENTRIS. Usually I would be speaking from the M. Kamal Hassan Memorial Library, but because of clashing with some other programs, I am here delivering to you the monthly sessions on reading of natural science from the worldview of the Quran from the meeting room of CENTRIS. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Salam Shawwal, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have accepted our good deeds in Ramadan, as well as our fasting in Shawwal, as well as all of our good deeds throughout our life. Ameen. So today, inshallah, we will continue our discussions with volume 1. With volume 1 of natural science from the worldview of the Quran. And I have explained quite extensively the 3-step methodology that has been used in terms of formulating the contents of the natural science from the worldview of the Quran, an introduction, all the 3 volumes, volume 1, volume 2, and volume 3. So this is the 3-step methodology as well as the framework. Trying to proceed with the slide, but it doesn't want to proceed. The PowerPoint is not responding. So anyhow, we have our model, which is based on the Quranic worldview framework, which inshallah, I hope it will appear soon. But the PowerPoint decides not to respond at the moment. Yeah, there it is. So natural science from the worldview of the Quran. This is the simplified schematic representation of the Ulul Albab integrated model framework for natural science. But actually, this framework is applicable to whatever science or whatever knowledge domain that we have, yeah, because this is like the fundamental framework which can be brought to application for many different fields. So we are in volume 1. Not sure why this thing is slow. So we have completed the introduction part with part 1, discussions on the necessity of studying and mastering natural science, and part 2 of the introduction, the fundamental rationales for advocating the study of natural science from the worldview of the Quran. So last month, we started on chapter 1 of volume 1 with part 1, the rationale from the history of Islamic civilization. Today we go to part 2, the rationale from the crisis of modern science and the environment. But before I begin to discuss on part 2, we have a little of review of what we did in part 1, which is the rationale deduced from the history of Islamic civilization. Yeah, so inshallah, today we'll go to part 2. But in part 1, we discussed on this thing here, the rationale from the history of Islamic civilization, the scientific contributions of Islam to European Renaissance and the relevance of Islamic conception of nature to the contemporary world according to some prominent Western personalities, observers, and historians of science. So last month, we talked about the self-critical, thought-provoking analysis of Prince Charles. Of course, at this point in time, he was Prince Charles, but I mean, the time that we were writing this book, he was Prince Charles, now he is King Charles. So let us just review a little bit about what Prince Charles at that point in time, particularly in 1993 here, what he said. Yeah. So let's go into our revision. Prince Charles' admission that Islam can teach us a way of understanding and living in the world because it still preserves an integral view of the universe, which unites religion and science, man and nature, and mind and matter, is extremely assuring for us Muslims. Of course, the expressions in the quotation marks are Prince Charles, the rest are Professor Kamal Hassan's. Not many Western leaders would be so humble and honest to make such statement. So whenever I highlight the statements with this yellow color, this is the what Prince Charles had written. So he said, Prince Charles said, more than this, Islam can teach us today a way of understanding and living in the world, which Christianity itself is poorer for having lost. At the heart of Islam is its preservation of an integral view of the universe. Islam, like Buddhism and Hinduism, refuses to separate man and nature, religion and science, mind and matter, and has preserved a metaphysical and unified view of ourselves and the world around us. So let me just read this blue quotation for which taken from Prince Charles said in 1993, the increasing tendency in the West to live on the surface of our surroundings, just on the surface of our surroundings, where we study our world in order to manipulate and dominate it, turning harmony and beauty into disequilibrium and chaos. And disequilibrium and chaos is what we are observing today. More so now than ever before, quite astounding disequilibrium and unfathomable chaos. Before that, let me just check who is online to welcome everybody. So we have here Brother Afif, Dr. Taufik, as well as Brother Shahzan as my helper. So hopefully, inshallah, there would be more people joining for us to share the wisdom of Almarhum Professor Kamal Hassan. And at this juncture, he is quoting from relevant thoughts of Western figures in terms of natural science approach from the worldview of the Quran or from Islamic approach. So I continue our revision of last month. Prince Charles continued, Western civilization has become increasingly acquisitive and exploitive in defiance of our environmental responsibilities. This was prior to the movement in terms of sustainability, the movement of the SDGs, for example, and before that, something else. So this was quite before, but whatever it is, even today, Western civilization has become increasingly acquisitive and exploitive in defiance of our environmental responsibilities. This crucial sense of oneness and trusteeship of the vital, sacramental, and spiritual character of the world about us is surely something important we can relearn from Islam, said Prince Charles. I am quite sure some will instantly accuse me, as they usually do, of living in the past, of refusing to come to terms with reality and modern life. On the contrary, ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, what I am appealing for is a wider, deeper, more careful understanding of our world, for a metaphysical as well as material dimension to our lives, in order to recover the balance, the equilibrium that we have abandoned. If my students are here today, you may recall what I mentioned in class about naturalism, secular humanism, and how these isms have become myopic. They are suffering from intellectual, moral, spiritual, as well as social myopia. So let's continue what Prince Charles had written here. For a metaphysical as well as material dimension to our lives, in order to recover the balance we have abandoned, the absence of which I believe will prove disastrous in the long term. And of course, these have proven disastrous. More than disasters to the environment, also disasters to the human beings. If the ways of thought in Islam and other religions can help us in that search, then there are things for us to learn in this system of belief, i.e. Islam, which I suggest we ignore at our peril. So Prince Charles said here in 2010, we quote, when we hear talk of an environmental crisis or even of a financial crisis, I would suggest that this is actually describing the outward consequences of a deep inner crisis of the soul. And we are going to look at this in a bit more detail before we go on to what we are actually going to present today. So Prince Charles continued, the utter dominance of the mechanistic approach of science. And if I have my students here, you should recall what is mechanistic approach or what is mechanistic philosophy. The utter dominance of the mechanistic approach of science over everything else, including religion, has de-souled, have robbed the soul from the dominant worldview, or de-souled the dominant worldview. The soul has been robbed out. And that includes our perception of nature. As soul is elbowed out of the picture, our deeper link with the natural world is severed. Our sense of the spiritual relationship between humanity, the earth, and her great diversity of life has become dim. The entire emphasis is all on the mechanical process of increasing growth in the economy, of making every process more efficient, and achieving as much convenience as possible. And this we have seen, for example, in the capitalistic economy, the hegemony of capitalism in our economy, and how the rich becomes much richer and the poor much poorer, and the cost of living skyrockets, as well as because of wanting to make their exploration of the earth or development of the earth as convenient as possible, we see deforestation. We see cutting off hills and mountains and to detrimental effects. We see also boring of the earth crust or underneath the earth for tunnels and so on and so forth, to the point that over the years, we have sinkholes, sometimes small, sometimes big, huge sinkholes. I continue with what Prince Charles said. The environmental destruction and the imbalance in nature can be reversed. Sorry, this is not what Prince Charles said. This is what Prof. Kamal Hassan said. Yeah, my apology for the little mistake. Let me just unhighlight that. Yeah, the yellow is what Prince Charles said. So Prof. Kamal said, the environmental destruction and the imbalance in nature can be reversed, in his opinion, by reconnecting ourselves with the wisdom found in nature, which is stressed by each of the sacred traditions in their own way. He says, Prince Charles says, that Islam warns that to deny the reality of our inner being leads to an inner darkness, which can quickly extend outwards into the world of nature. the inner darkness that quickly extends outward to the darkness of the world of nature, even at the heyday of the midday, even at the peak of the sun, brightly shining, but it's actually dark. Not dark in the physical sense, but dark in other sense. If we ignore the calling of the soul, then we destroy nature. And this we have seen. As a matter of fact, if I am not mistaken, in 2009, scientists said we had 11 years to revert the destruction to closely resembling, or as close as possible, resembling how nature was. But that 11 years has expired. 2009 plus 11 is 2020. Now is 2025. So what we can do now is just to stop further damage so that the earth can be salvaged, not to have further destruction. From what I know of the Quran, said Prince Charles, again and again, it describes the natural world as the handiwork of a unitary benevolent power, i.e. God. It very explicitly describes nature as possessing an intelligibility, and that there is no separation between man and nature. And I bear witness to this intelligibility because I am from chemistry and I study chemistry, and I can see the intelligibility built in to nature, built into our cells, built into the atoms, as well as the molecules, as well as the mechanism of DNA replication, for example, or protein synthesis, very much so, like inherent intelligibility that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed within. And Prince Charles said in 2010, if we ignore the calling of the soul, I'm reading up here, if we ignore the calling of the soul, then we destroy nature. From what I know of the Quran, again and again, it describes the natural world as the handiwork of a unitary benevolent power. We continue with this little bit of a review of what we did last month. My computer is slow, so excuse me for that. The Prince of Wales, Prince Charles, regards the Quranic vision of nature as a form of, quote, divine hospitality that offers us our provisions and our dwelling places, our clothing, tools, and transport. The earth is robust and prolific, but also very delicate, subtle, complex, and diverse. As so, our mark must always be gentle. Gentle. Respecting the balance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, he didn't say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but the balance that God has put in nature, put in humanity. We have to be gentle, respecting this order, respecting this delicate, subtle, complex, and diverse identity of nature, as well as human being. Or the water will disappear, as it is doing in places like the Punjab in India, as well as in the Red Sea. It's disappearing. In criticizing the worldview of empiricism, i.e. believing in the total authority, absolute authority of empirical science, Prince Charles asserts, clearly there is a point beyond which empiricism cannot make complete sense of the world. It works by establishing facts through testing them by the scientific process. I would like to stress here, empirical science is very important, yes, indeed. As a matter of fact, humanity learns empirical science from none other but Muslims. And Muslims, our early forefathers, learned or got inspired to do empirical science, none other than the Quran itself. So clearly there is a point beyond which empiricism cannot make complete sense of the world, cannot make complete sense of the world. It makes some sense of the world, but not complete sense of the world. It works by establishing facts through testing them by the scientific process. It is one kind of language. and a very fine one, but it is a language not able to fathom experiences like faith or the meaning of things. It is not able to articulate matters of the soul. Now, this is Prof. Kamal saying, he believes that empiricism deprives human beings from the deep-seated experience of participation in the living, creative presence of God. Living, creative presence of God, not the distant, non-active God, like in the deistic understanding of God, which is often by revelation, which he describes as follows. Now I am quoting from Prince Charles. This is a rare and precious gift and only given to those whose supreme humanity and capacity for great humility achieves a mastery over the ego. Wow. Prince Charles said this. This is a rare and precious gift and only given to those whose supreme humanity and capacity for great humility achieves a mastery over the ego. This, of course, is not deemed possible from an empirical point of view, but revelation is a very different kind of knowing from scientific, evidence-based knowledge, and I cannot stress the point strongly enough. By dismissing such a process and discarding what it offers to humankind, i.e., what revelation offers to humankind, we throw away a very important lifeline for the future. So this is a very naturalistic way of looking at things, whereby nature is exhausted, reality is exhausted by nature, meaning to say, outside of nature, things are not real. There is no reality. Nature explains itself, meaning to say, whatever that we want to learn from nature can be learned from nature, meaning to say, we do not refer to revelation, we do not refer to what God says, we do not refer to anything outside of nature. And that's the meaning of reality is exhausted by nature, meaning to say there's no reality outside of nature, meaning to say there is no God, there is no prophets, there is no life after death, there is no heaven and hell, there is no jinn, there is no devil, there is no, things that are intangible from empirical sciences. A little bit more of our revision on Prince Charles, which is the first part of this first chapter. In the end, the prince reprimands Muslim communities for slavishly copying the West. Yes, we indeed copy the West. We may say, oh, we look to Korea, with K-pop and what else, but what is the model for K-pop? What is the model for this development? Again, they are modeled much after the West. Even the way that Japanese dress in the contemporary sense, they are the things that they do very much also copying the West. And we in this part of the world also copy the West slavishly. And he said, Prince Charles, why ape the West? Why are we aping the West? The Islamic world is the custodian of one of the greatest treasuries of accumulated wisdom and spiritual knowledge available to humanity. It is both Islam's noble heritage and a priceless gift to the rest of the world, and yet so often that wisdom is now obscured by the dominant drive towards Western materialism. The feeling that to be truly modern, you have to ape the West. This is none other than Prince Charles said at that point in time. In 1993, and the latest one that we quoted was from 2010. All right, a little bit more. The Western outlook that has dominated the world for a century, says Prince Charles, is the modernist ideology which regards the traditional religious worldview as backward-looking, unsophisticated. Because in the naturalistic worldview, if we were to believe in God, it is like our mind is not sophisticated. We have to depend on something bigger than us, just like a child, dependent upon something that would give the child a false sense of security. For example, his blanket or his pillow or his teddy bear, and refusing these items to be washed. For then it is devoid of the smell that he feels secure with. But this feeling of security is false security. So we have a concept in the modern mind, or in the modern thinking, this false security blanket. So the idea of God is like a false security blanket for people who are unsophisticated. So sophisticated people are those who don't depend on religion, those who don't depend on God, those who are not theistic. In other words, atheistic, or at least agnostic. In reality, religious tradition is, according to Prince Charles, the accumulation of the knowledge and wisdom that we should be offering to the next generation. He's right on correct there. It is therefore visionary. It looks forward. So if we were to hold on to this Quranic worldview, we are not going back. We are looking forward, and what could be more forward-looking or futuristic than the Islamic worldview, because we ensure the future to be, sustainable, as well as the future after life, the eternity. So what could be more forward-looking than that? He admits that it is not easy. This is Prof. Kamal saying, therefore, for Western societies to return to the theistic worldview in the understanding of nature, because, quoting from Prince Charles, for many in the modern world, this is hard to understand because the view of God has become so distorted. God is seen as being somehow outside of his creation rather than part of his unfolding. This is part of the deistic understanding of God, whereby after God has formulated nature from matter that already existed, because in the deistic understanding, there is no creation ex nihilo. There's no creation of something out of nothing, because in the past, this deistic understanding of God is based on an anthropomorphic kind of God, a God that is anthropomorphic, having human characteristics, because this is actually taken from ancient Greek, and according to the Greek mythology, God had human characteristics or human tendencies. Why is that? Because in the geocentric cosmology of ancient Greek, the earth is the center of the universe. And the earth is just a place for punishment, and the center of the earth is hell. So the point is not really to develop the earth, because it's a place for punishment for sinners. We are all sinners. The point is, in this cosmology of geocentricity, nobility rises. The more distance we are from this punishing place, which is the earth, the more noble we become. So in this cosmology, the levels beyond the Earth atmosphere, the higher levels of the atmosphere, is the realm of the angels, and beyond these realms of the angels is the realm of gods. So when we are good, or when we are not good, we die, we will be punished inside the earth. But if we are good, we rise to the level of angels, or if we are better, we rise to the level of gods. And that is why gods, in the Greek understanding, they can fight each other. They fought with even human, right? So gods, in that sense, in the deistic sense, which is derived from Greek mythology, had human characteristic. So after God had formulated nature from matter that already in existence, because nobody can create matter, because matter has to be created from nothing, and no one, including God, because God is anthropomorphic, having human tendencies and characteristics. God or gods cannot create something out of nothing. So God didn't create matter. And as a matter of fact, God didn't create in the deistic understanding. God formulated nature from matter that already existed. And once he had completed formulating nature with all the laws of nature embedded, so nature runs by itself. God sets himself away from nature. God doesn't have anything to do anything more to nature because nature runs by itself. So nature runs by itself like clockwork. So therefore we have this clockmaker or watchmaker analogy in the deistic sense. Once God had formulated nature, he sets himself away from nature. He doesn't have anything to do with nature anymore. Nature runs itself like a clockwork. So this is where Prince Charles is coming in saying, where was I? For many in the modern world, this is hard to understand because the view of God had become so distorted. Distorted how? God is seen as being somehow outside of his creation. He doesn't get involved with his creation anymore, rather than part of its unfolding, rather than the part of nature unfolding. But of course, in the Islamic understanding, nature, i.e. God's creatures, and God as the creator, al-Khaliq, never al-Khaliq be one with makhluk. But even so, God is closer to us than our own jugular vein. And whatever that happens in this world is by his will. And he is the primary cause to everything that occurs. So that is, a little bit about the Islamic understanding. So I'm going to continue a little bit more of this Prince Charles before going to what we are going to do today. All right, so let's just read this little bit of quotation of what Prince Charles said. It is the notion of Tawheed, the oneness of all things within the embrace of the divine unity. Notice the emphasis there on uncreated. We'll go to that paragraph. It is of profound importance, this uncreatedness of God, the basis of all existence. All right, I continue with this yellow marked text. The importance of re-establishing man's relationship with the sustainer of the cosmos is emphasized by Prince Charles in the following statement. Quote, being the principle that underlies the cosmos is the result of God knowing it, and of it knowing the uncreated God. Every part, every constituent of nature knows God and celebrates praises of God, even the cells in our body, even the cells and the molecules and the atoms on the bodies of atheists. These cells, these atoms, these molecules are always celebrating the praises of God, even if the atheist doesn't acknowledge God, but his body, it's the nature of the body to constantly in praise of God. Notice the emphasis there on uncreated. It is of profound importance, the basis of all existence in this relationship. Yeah? So God is uncreated, but creatures are created. All right, so that's the revision of what we did last month. So today we are going to look into another figure, Western figure, because this part of the chapter is quoted from Western figures, some Western figures, not all of them, whose views are relevant to what we are talking about, which is natural science from the worldview of the Quran. So here we have Carly Fiorina, born in 1954, the frank observations of an American business leader, Carly Fiorina. I didn't have a chance to search for her and then put it here, but you can search Carly Fiorina, just Google and you can find her. So below are some observations made by Carly Fiorina, the American Chief Executive Officer of Hewlett-Packard. If you are using HP, you are using the product of the company that Carly Fiorina is the Chief Executive Officer, who was a prominent and highly influential businesswoman during her leadership of Lucent and Hewlett-Packard from 1999 to 2005. The important observations were made during her speech on technology, business, and our way of life. What's next? So that was her speech, delivered in Minnesota on September 26, 2001. That's 24 years ago. The first point in her speech is the statement, that Islamic civilization was at one time in the past the greatest civilization in the world. And I think it's not just in the past. It is still today, because Islamic civilization is comprehensive. It's not just material. Of course, we have low points and high points of Islamic civilization, but overall, it is based on Tawheed. And therefore, when we talk about Tawheed, our current rector talks about the Tawheedic epistemology. With Tawheedic epistemology, it also goes into the unity of creation. All creation is united by this Tawheedic, by the fact that they are created by God, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And all constituents of nature is aware of this Tawheedic essence of things. All right, so we continue with Carly Fiorina, the former CEO of Hewlett Packard. Is my computer HP?
Yes.
So I don't want to do this, but yep, it's HP. Yeah. All right. So we go to the next page. Yes, is this the page? No, I think I missed something. Here is the page. Yeah, that was the one that we talked about. So here's the page. And by the way, this is page 88 of the book, Natural Science from the Worldview of the Quran. In chapter 1, we are on part 1. There was once a civilization that was the greatest in the world. Of course, this is Carly Fiorina. It was able to create a continental superstate that stretched from ocean to ocean and from northern climes to tropics and deserts. I may add from my own input is that, to me, Islam was the global factor. Muslims were the first globalization force. Why do I say that? Because, you know, we Muslims, our forefathers, had impacted the world in all matters, even in music, in fashion, in culinary tradition, for example. So it's a global factor. There was once a civilization, said Carly Fiorina, that was the greatest in the world. It was able to create a continental superstate that stretched from ocean to ocean and from northern climes to tropics and deserts. Within its dominion lived hundreds of millions of people of different creeds and ethnic origins. One of its languages became the universal language of much of the world, which is Arabic, the bridge between the peoples of 100 lands. Its armies were made up of people of many nationalities. We can see, for example, the Ottoman Empire. The army of the Ottoman Empire is from different, I mean, at that point in time, there was no nationality, but different lands, so to speak. Not nationalities, because nationhood is, you know, a modern thing, a modern phenomena. Before this, we have Malay archipelago, we have the Arab lands with many multiple countries, but not as we have today with artificial national borders. And its military protection allowed a degree of peace and prosperity that had never been known. Yes, the reach of this civilization's commerce extended from Latin America to China and everywhere else in between. Now, according to Prof. Kamal, her second point is that Islamic civilization was driven by the scientific and investigative spirit of innovativeness and creativity. So we read the quote, and this civilization was driven more than anything by invention. Its architects designed buildings that defied gravity. Of course, look at the huge domes of our masajid. And they're beautiful, yes, but they're not just for beauty. The Muslims learned from nature When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created, He created with beauty and functionality, aesthetics, as well as practicality. So when Muslims made the buildings with those beautiful domes, the domes actually were practical. They didn't have any amplifier in terms of voice. So during khutbah, the khatib would be somewhere there at the mimbar, and the whole masjid would be filled with people. People may not be able to hear. But because of the dome, and if you are in mathematics or an engineer, of course, you know that we have the sound waves that are going to be traveling from the source, traveling to the edge of the inside of the dome, and then this sound wave will be reflected back. With certain accurate calculation, then we have one focal point for which all of these waves that have been reflected would be reflected to this one focal point, and then our voice would be amplified. If you don't believe me, if you are living in Malaysia, go to the science center. Where is that science center? Near Mount Kiara. Yeah, you just outside of the entrance, there's a small entrance with a small blue dome on top. And you try to stand right in the center on the floor, and then you speak, or you clap your hand, and you hear as if you have this microphone and sound system that amplifies your voice. So the smartness of people in the past, yeah? Beauty marries functionality. Where did they learn this from? They learned it from observing creatures of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Always beauty and functionality. Another example, human beings, we have our skin, and our skin is very beautiful, no matter what color. Imagine if we don't have our skin. Skin is making us beautiful, yes, but if we don't have our skin, can we survive? We can't. We would be diseased very quickly. Our skin is the largest organ in our body and very important. So beauty and functionality, aesthetics, as well as practicality. So our Muslim forefathers understood that, because Allah said in the Quran to observe nature, and they did observe nature, and they found this. And to that extent, we have now in engineering biomimicry, mimic biology, mimic things that are found in living beings. For example, in Olympics, when the swimmers swim, they have this swimming suit, which is specially designed. The material mimics the skin of sharks. If you look at this, of course, if you look with naked eyes on the skin of the shark, you can't see. But if you were brave enough to pet the shark, you pet it this way, it feels different than you pet it the other way. Of course, fish also the same. And when you look under electron micrograph, for example, you would see the structure of the skin with triangular, minute scales, not like the fish scale, which is quite big, but minute scale, yeah? From far, the skin looks smooth, but when you look closely with electron micrograph, for example, you will see like triangular scales, and this, you found it. And this allows the hydrodynamicity of sharks, yeah, hydrodynamism of shark. Of course, the shape of the shark is also hydrodynamic. See Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can see, you can't see him, but you can see his book in nature. And when we study nature, we study the book of this magnificent author, Allahu Akbar, and that's why science from the worldview of the Quran is very important, because that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to do when He draws our attention to the different signs in nature, isn't it? Yeah. If we go to calculate how many verses in the Quran that points onto the signs of nature, the signs of humanity in history, I don't know how many. Maybe you can do it, search, or anybody from ICT can do big data analytics and can share with us the information on how many verses, or actually, how many verses or how many words describe or draw our attention to Allah's signs in nature. I will continue with Fiore, this fellow, Fiore, whatever her name is, Fiore something, Florina? Carly Fiorina. But before that, I see 3 chats. Let me check the chats. Oh, this is like, attendance for CENTRIS-IIUM participants, the attendance. And let's see participants who are here. We have Brother Halil, MashaAllah. Welcome, Brother Halil, your first time joining this program. And then we have Sister Hanum, and we have Muhammad Ikhwan Haziq. Muhammad Shahzan is our helper, and Sister Nofa also is there. Sister Nofa, you can come in and join us here. Yeah, you're just outside. Come in, Sister Nofa. You can join us inside. Don't feel shy. All right, I continue with Carly Fiorina. And this civilization has driven more than anything by invention. This Islamic civilization is driven by invention. Its architects designed buildings that defied gravity. Its mathematicians created the algebra and algorithms that would enable the building of computers. Hewlett-Packard computers, or your phones. And even before this type of phones, our calculator, when I was a student, we had to have a calculator, a scientific calculator. I think that scientific calculator is now extinct. We had to have that. Without what al-Khwarizmi has done with 0, and then people have this binary system of 0 ones, then we would not have calculators, and therefore we will not have our cell phones today or computers. And scientific notations would be impossible. Therefore, scientific calculations would be impossible as well. Do you know what is scientific notation? Like, for example, a million with 6 zeros, right? Is 1 times 10 to the power of 6. Yeah. Or nano. We have nanotechnology, nano-size particles. 0.00000000001 nanotechnology. If we were to write that in Latin numerals, imagine. I cannot imagine. But that can be designated with scientific notation to 1 times 10 to the power of -9. MashaAllah. The brilliance of our forefather. Not that they created everything. They learned from ancient civilization. Al-Khwarizmi learned the concept of 0 from Hindus, but then the Hindus did not develop it. He developed it further. And as a matter of fact, this is Islamization, for your information. Yeah. What else? Ibn Sina learned from the Greek, learned from the Persians, medicine, and then he, developed it further. Al-Ghazali learned philosophy from the Greek as well, but then he didn't adopt everything. He adapted things. He adapted those that are in line with Tawhid. He took and developed further. Those which are not very in line with Tawhid, he tried to repair to be more in line with Tawhid. Or if it's totally against Tawhid, then that should be discarded. And as a matter of fact, if I may revert to my very first slides, to the model that I showed in the beginning, this is what is done. Identification of the elements that are incompatible or injurious to Tawhidic worldview, and then purification by correcting, redefining, redirecting, repositioning, or discarding those that cannot be salvaged. And then later on, beautification and enrichment. But before that, we have to master that body of knowledge. Like, for example, Al-Ghazali mastered Greek philosophy within what, 3 years, if I'm not mistaken? He taught himself Greek philosophy, correct? So much so that he mastered Greek philosophy. He could write Greek philosophy. In what book, I cannot remember. It is as if he subscribed to the Greek philosophy. But he didn't subscribe in total. He took what is suitable, he developed it further, he discarded those that are not suitable. And that was the spirit also when he wrote the Hafut al-Falasifa, to correct the false understanding of some of our scholars in the past, for example, Ibn Sina and Al-Razi, that took some aspects of Greek mythology or Greek philosophy to be, their understanding of God, for example. So that had to be corrected. Okay, so I will jump back down to where I was. No, not here. No, I have gone beyond. Which page was I?
19 or 18.
Oh, we've done this one, yes. And then, yes, here. I think so. No, it was here, right? So it's, where is it? Computers. So, and this civilization was driven more than anything by invention. Its architects designed buildings that defied gravity. I got distracted with computer. Its mathematicians created the algebra and algorithms that would enable the building of computers and the creation of encryption. Its doctors examined the human body and found new cures for diseases. Now, let me stop here for a while. When our doctors in the past found cures for diseases, it's really cures. It's not some prescription that numbs the pain, or it's not some prescription that only dealt with the symptoms. It cured. Because what Ibn Sina wrote was actually sources of cure from nature, from, plants, for example. So today there is a movement of this holistic healing from nature back to how it should be. For example, Malaysia, unfortunately, because of our love for food, and we like to eat so much that we don't think what we put in our mouth and into our tummy. Even Rasulullah SAW had said that, diseases originated from the stomach, right? So people in Malaysia, or Malaysia has, I think Malaysia is one of the highest, the country with one of the countries with the highest percentage of diabetics. Yeah. And that's what happens when we don't watch. Of course, some diabetics are inherited, genetically inherited diabetes, but some are, I'm sorry to say, artificially inflicted. Now, in our capitalistic economy, of course, Malaysia is a Muslim country, but still it is entrapped by the hegemony of this capitalistic economy. And riding on this capitalistic economy, partly to help people, is the emergence of dialysis centers. And as a matter of fact, Malaysia is one of the most profitable countries for dialysis machine business. But dialysis machines do not cure diabetes. I have seen my brother-in-law, how he suffered with this, dialysis. And of course, he succumbed. So I'm sorry for the doctors out there. Maybe you can attack me later, but let me finish first. Our prescriptions today, is more on, I'm going to say something that is quite controversial, but I have to say it. Our medicine today is more on getting, or is part of the mechanism of getting the big pharma to be rich, because the prescriptions don't heal. They are just treatments on the symptoms. They don't heal. Because similarly with this capitalistic economy that has been apparent onto the business of computers, laptops, because laptops have been created today not to last very long. I have a bonus. My laptop is now 5 years old, but of course with a lot of problems had to send it for repair many times. But internal repair, we have our technician. But if I were to send it to the shop, they would say, "Allah kakak, oh sister, no need to repair. You buy a new one with more, features and, just cheap now." So we end up with a lot of high-tech trash. Imagine how many computers have you had, each one of you, including handphones. Where did all of this, the old malfunctioning computers and cell phones go to? If you were to search online high-tech trash, you will be astounded to find this phenomena, and it is one of the tragedies of modern life. Okay, now I get back to what Kali Fiorina is saying. So if you want to attack me later, okay? But that's actually a fact, yeah? It's astronomers, our early astronomers during the height of Islamic civilizations, its astronomers looked into the heavens, named the stars, and paved the way for space travel and exploration. Paved the way, of course, they didn't travel to space, but they paved the way to make space travel and exploration possible. Its writers created thousands of stories. The stories were of courage, romance, and magic. Its poets wrote of love, but then not really of romantic love. For example, what's his name? Jalaluddin Rumi, he didn't write on romantic love, but of course he had been misinterpreted. The love that he wrote was between him, from him to the creator. But, people misinterpreted him. So its poets wrote of love when others before them were too steeped in fear to think of such things. Her last point emphasizes the spirit of striving for knowledge and new ideas, which was supported by enlightened leaders. We quote, "When other nations were afraid of ideas, this civilization thrived on them, thrived on ideas, and kept them alive. When censors threatened to wipe out knowledge from past civilizations, for example, how Copernicus and Galileo one of them were punished because they wrote about heliocentricity. The other one escaped punishment because he died. Now, mind you, heliocentricity was inspired by one or two of the Muslim writers. They were writing to suggest that it's not geocentricity. The earth is not the center of the universe, but the sun is the center of our system. I mean, they didn't develop it fully, but indications that, the idea that the earth is the center of the universe is actually faulty. Anyhow, so that was censored by the ancient Catholic Church. And, today we have the censors too. Of course, students from some universities in America have been sent back because of their thinking of, as well as their comments and position on what is happening today in Palestine, for example. So when other nations were afraid or made afraid of ideas, this civilization thrived on them and kept them alive. When censors threatened to wipe out knowledge from past civilizations, I was going to mention about Francis Bacon. Now, what Francis Bacon wrote in his book, Novum Organum Scientiarum, was that one of the things that he wrote hundreds of aphorisms, like fatwa, so to speak. You have to follow this fatwa if you were to do science. Novum Organum Scientiarum, the new way of doing science. So he said in one of the aphorisms, if you want to do science, you shouldn't be bothered about what the Arabs have written. What the Arabs, the volumes of books that they have written, these are just nonsense. What you should be, concerned with was what the Greek had written and what we are accomplishing now, i.e. during the modern era in the 16th, 17th century. So that is why today, when we read our books, there is no mention of Islamic figures, even in areas where Muslims had contributed immensely. Most of the books, because whatever that the Arabs had achieved, these are nonsense, just throw them, they are rubbish. But of course, they didn't just throw them, they plagiarized. Some, if not all.
Instead of them to acknowledge them their names.
Yeah, no.
They romanize their names.
Right.
Like
Avicenna, Averroes. If they acknowledged, yes, some they don't acknowledge. For example, we have this Archimedes principle. Archimedes got the name, but Muslim scientists wrote much like 200 years earlier. And we even have the Newton gravitational force, Newton law of gravity. Newton got his name, but actually Muslim scientists wrote much earlier. Now, one thing I would like to mention is that, excuse me for a while, I need to get one copy of the book. This one is still in plastic, but it's not in plastic. Brother, can you help me get one without plastic from our room, from my room? Just to show you that in this book, in this 3-volume book, Natural Science, you open the cupboard or at the shelf, you see volume 1 at the shelf. You enter and you see the shelf. All 3 volumes. I mean, actually one of the volumes. So anyways, to undo what modernity had done to science, which is negating the achievement of Muslims, we have in the beginning, thank you very much, we have in the beginning of our 3 volumes, our timeline. So I want to show you because this is very important. I grew up without knowing any Muslim figures with their contributions. So I grew up feeling very small, with very small sense of self. I grew up very, what do you call that, when you have very small sense of self? Inferiority complex. Yeah, like what have Muslims done? Nothing. But actually, we have done a lot. So this is a timeline from the 7th century to, I don't know whether you can see it. Can you see it? Those online? Yeah, but this is just some. I couldn't fit everything. Yeah, some of the achievement of our scholars. Just some, not all. And I had to make the font very small to fit. But this is just a timeline. But if you were to dig and you read, it's really astonishing. Subhanallah. Their kind of thinking, even Al-Ghazali, if we were to read Al-Ghazali, his thinking is very contemporary. But he wrote this like 1,000 years ago. So anyways, coming back to Carly Fiorina, I'm sorry for, diverting very so often, but I think it's necessary. When other nations were afraid of ideas, this civilization thrived on them and kept them alive. When senses threatened to wipe out knowledge from past civilization, this civilization kept the knowledge alive and passed it on to others. While modern Western civilization shares many of these traits, the civilization I'm talking about was the Islamic world from the year 800 to 1600, which included the Ottoman Empire and the courts of Baghdad, Damascus, and Cairo, and enlightened rulers like Suleiman the Magnificent. And we know, I think, during the time of the Ottoman, cannot remember his name, he wanted to fly. What was the name of this person? Al-Firnas, something Al-Firnas. Al-Farabi, no, not Al-Farabi. Ibn Firnas, his name is Firnas. He tried to fly. So he built himself big, huge wings, yeah, and he did flew for quite a distance, but then he forgot the tail. because the tail helped to maneuver when he needed to land. But because he forgot the tail part, he took his inspiration from birds. So he was soaring, you know, jumped from one of the towers in the Ottoman Empire, if I'm not mistaken. And then he flew, and then how would he land? So he crash landed.
But it was
Firnas, Ibn Firnas. Firnas, not Farabi.
I don't believe that is Arabic.
No.
Because it was, I think it was the one being called as Shahid al-Ilm, the Messiah of
Knowledge, the sciences. No, Ibn Firnas, no, he wasn't called that way. Ibn Firnas was more like an engineer rather than a scientist. Yes. And please find out, where did he live? Which country was it? All right, so, you know, spanned from the Ottoman Empire to the courts of Baghdad, Damascus, and Cairo, and with enlightened rulers like Sulaiman the Magnificent, Sulaiman al-Qanuni.
Even his picture was with
the wing. MashaAllah. Is that in Uzbekistan or Kazakhstan? I can't remember. Okay, never mind. It's okay. Even if you were to go to Uzbekistan, you will see the remnants of the huge Spain then. Spain, Andalusia. Yeah. The huge sectant to measure the angles of the sun, the stars, things like that. The mathematical instrument. Back then, as a student of science, as mathematics, we had this box of, you know, instrument, including the half circle, the triangle, the sextant, and then the compass. Nowadays, I don't see students walking with those. But anyways, so in Uzbekistan, they had this full size of a giant sextant. I can't remember the scholar's name. Those who remember, please let us share with us. All right, so let us continue. It's already 4:07. Now, that whatever Carlo Fiorina said, this is the end of it. Yeah, let's look at this footnote 11. Carly Fiorina, in September 26, 2001. That's too small to read for you there. Let me read it here. Technology, business, and our way of life. What's next? That's his writing, her writing. Accessible from this website. Compare this to the statement by Prince Charles that in the West we have tended to ignore or erase. This is the comment by Prof. Kamal. Ignore or erase its Islamic civilization, great relevance to our history. Oh, sorry, this is not Prof. Kamal saying, Prince Charles saying, we have tended to ignore or erase its, i.e. Islamic civilization, great relevance to our own history. So whatever that Carly Fiorina said rings very much similar to what Prince Charles had said. So I feel compelled to continue a little bit. We will continue a little bit about what Robert Briffault had said. Robert Briffault was born in 1876 and died in 1948. So it's quite a long time ago. This is his, whatever that he said. Then he mentioned about Iqbal. For those of you who don't know Iqbal, this was how Iqbal looked like, a very handsome man. And this is the book that he wrote, Iqbal, The Reconstruction of Religious Thought in Islam. I recommend you to read this book by Muhammad Iqbal. And of course, Prof. Kamal Hassan was a fan of Iqbal. And his good friend, Al-Marhum, both are Al-Marhum Sheikh Uthman al-Muhammadi, was so much smitten with Iqbal. He himself told me that he had a portrait of Iqbal larger than life. He couldn't hang in his room, so he just put the frame against the wall. Very huge poster or framed picture of Iqbal. So Robert Briffault was trained as a surgeon, but later turned to the study of social anthropology, in which he became well known. He was a trained surgeon, but he turned into social anthropology. Like this comedian, what's his name? The Egyptian comedian who had much commented on Zionism. He was a surgeon. He was a practicing surgeon turned comedian. And with his comedy, he took the comedy license to inject vicious, not vicious, like, surgical precision comments about what's happening in Palestine. Can't remember his name. His book was an eye-opener for the Western public. Robert Briffault's book was an eye-opener for the Western public whose understanding of Islam and its civilization was based on misconceptions, distortions, untruths, and prejudices. It was Sir Muhammad Iqbal who lived from 1877 to 1938, the great Muslim poet, philosopher of early 20th century, who drew our attention in his book, The Reconstruction of Religious Thought in Islam, published 1930, to the most revealing statements of Robert Briffault. Iqbal rejected the popular belief in the West that it was Europe that introduced the experimental method of science. It is known to objective historians that Roger Bacon's views, this is Roger Bacon, not Francis Bacon. There are two Bacons. I guess the West loved Bacon so much that it became a family name. That Roger Bacon's views of science too have been derived from Arab sources via the Jewish students of Muslim learning in Andalusia. Iqbal's belief that the 5th chapter of Roger Bacon's book, Opus Majus, was taken from Ibn Haytham's Optics. I mean, this is not an isolated case. This is not an isolated case. There are many cases like this. Yeah?
Without acknowledgement.
Without acknowledgement. So plagiarism was introduced. I mean, plagiarism is not a culture of Muslims. Because Muslims, when they quoted hadith, you know how, right?
Yes.
From who, until the Prophet ﷺ himself. And we can see this in the works of our previous scholars. I quoted them in my thesis. Like, for example, I cannot remember the figure, but then in his writing, he said, we are, in our practice, we acknowledge the sources, something like that, he said. And I quoted it in my thesis. I don't have my thesis in front of me. I wrote that years ago. I can't remember. But inshallah, one of these days, I'll bring it up. So Iqbal rejected the popular belief in the West that it was Europe that introduced the experimental methods of science. It is known to objective historians that Roger Bacon's views of science too. So Roger Bacon was an objective historian, not like Francis Bacon. Francis Bacon wasn't a historian. Views of science too have been derived from Arab sources via the Jewish students of Muslim learning in Andalusia. Iqbal's belief that the 5th chapter of Roger Bacon's book, Opus Majus, was taken from Ibn Haytham's Optics without acknowledgement has now become widely known among historians of science. Let's continue a little bit more before Adhan. We believe that more Muslims and non-Muslims should know that Robert Briffault was discovered in his groundbreaking research on the history of Islamic civilization and its contribution to the rise of European Renaissance. Now, I have to take a note here that thanks to, in part, postmodernism that has this notion of deconstruction and reconstruction. So it was thanks to postmodernism that discovered the hidden works of Muslims for which the West had plagiarized. وَمَكَرُوا وَمَكَرَ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ. So they could hide for hundreds of years, but it has come out. Some of it has come out today. So such acknowledgement is not widely known because of what Briffault says as the general conspiracy of silence of our histories, like what Francis Bacon had promoted. Throw away what the Arabs have done, because to him, all Muslims are Arabs. Throw away what they have done. What they have done is rubbish. You don't have to consider them. But then, of course, they're smart. I mean, these people, they didn't throw. They took without acknowledgement. If we do not repeat here what Iqbal had found in the book of Robert Briffault, published in 1919, oh, sorry, it wasn't published in 1930, but 1919. But maybe 1930 was another publication. Or maybe 1930 was was Iqbal's book, sorry. I beg your forgiveness. 1930 was Iqbal's book, but Robert Briffault's book was 1919. If we do not repeat here what Iqbal had found in the book of Robert Briffault, published in 1919, we fear that many Muslims and non-Muslims will continue to remain ignorant of the true relationship between Islam and the West and the origins of the methods of empirical observation. I would like to comment here. In one of the speeches that Prince Charles, and now King Charles, as a king, he had said that we actually share a lot of things in common. Islamic civilization is not alien from Western civilization. As a matter of fact, Islam came to the West much earlier than now. And he mentioned certain examples. And you remember during the past Ramadan that just passed, he took effort to actually pack, of course, this doesn't count too much, but at least he had that empathy. Pack dates to be distributed to Muslims, he and his wife, who was quite oddly, moving and packing. And he wasn't odd, but the wife was quite oddly packing the dates in small packets. So Robert Briffault is so empathic in making the point that modern European civilization owes its genesis to the influence of Islamic culture, which developed natural science and promoted the scientific spirit. I think I will keep the rest for you to yearn to know in our next sharing, inshallah. Because it's already 4:16 and Adhan would be anytime soon. So I open the floor for us to discuss either here in this room or online. So please feel free to unmute yourselves and then we can discuss. Somebody said, Nofa said Abbas. Yes, Abbas ibn Firnas. Yes, for sure. MashaAllah. Abbas ibn Firnas. Who in the world would do that? Like, make a big canvas of wings and then put certain things on and then climb up and flew. But how do I land? So he fell hard. I don't know, what happened to him, but he fell very hard. Anyways.
The video, the one you mentioned.
1001 invention?
Yeah.
Yes.
It was. I think it was a replication of what happened to Abbas ibn Firnas.
Yes, in the video, right? Yeah. Not a true replication, but getting inspiration from there. Yeah. So, Brother Abdul Ghani, you are in two places at the same time. Brother Halil, Sister Nofa, Sister Siti Saleha, Brother Afif, Brother Ikhwan Hazik, Sister Hanum, Sister Izzah. Please, and Shahzan also, if you like to share something, please just unmute yourself and we can have a small discussion before Adhan. Yes, brother.
For anybody contribute.
Yeah, please speak louder.
I like to say that it has been a point of concern and discussion over time, talking about how the Muslim scholars of then used to be in terms of knowledge and all of that. And today, what do you think is the cause?
Just hold on, yeah? Can you please close the blind? Because it's very glaring. People cannot see. So sorry. Maybe Brother Bello, you close the blind because you're closer.
Yeah.
There, over there. Yeah, close the blind because the light forbid you from the other one.
The other one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Close it.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much. Okay. So now they can see you better. Can you repeat your question, please?
Yes, I would say that what affects us as Muslims today against the position, how the Muslim of those days used to be, because even recently I was reading about Ibn Haytham, being the first person to discover digital camera. So then they were so religious, they were very much, and then they are knowledgeable. What affects us as Muslims, as scholars today, and probably Because even in terms of religiosity, we are not up to them. And yes.
Yeah, I think anybody who's aspiring PhD can write a thesis on that because it is a big, big topic. But to me, the fact that they are religious, the fact that they understood the Quran through and through, the fact that many of them were walking Quran themselves, that was the factor that made them proceed with all branches of knowledge. Because the Quran is the mother of all knowledge, right? You have the key, you have the mother, then you become polymath. You don't just become expert in one, but you become polymath. The same person is a philosopher, the same person is a faqih, the same person is a musician, the same person is an astronomer, the same person is a mathematician, the same person is a doctor, is a poet. You yourself is a poet and you are a scholar here. So, to me, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive me for my non-mastery of the Quran, of the Quranic language. You all are master of the Quranic language. This is the key. So to me, the key to the future to create more of Al-Farabi, more of Al-Razi, more of Al-Ghazali, more of Ibn al-Haytham, for example, is for them to know the Quran, not just memorize, but understand the Quran. So Arabic language is very important. As a kid, I wasted my time. I had an Arabic language teacher who did not, may Allah forgive him, who did not care about the students. So we, in the class, studying Arabic, everybody was running around because it was in the afternoon. This is also the design of the colonial masters, regular school in the morning, Islamic school in the afternoon. And you go to two schools. Yeah. And of course, like little children, you're tired already by the end.
That is how we learn in Nigeria.
Yeah. And then
Islamic school.
Exactly. Right. Or Islamic subject in the morning, school in the afternoon, when students are already so tired. So these students, they are tired, they don't sleep, they run around. And the teacher just let them run around. And I was a goody two-shoes, so to speak. I didn't run around, but I did my homework of my morning school while the teacher was teaching me Arabic. So, I regret it, but I can't return the past. So my brain is like, not very flexible in learning Arabic anymore, but I tried. So to me, that's the very fact that they are very religious, the very fact that they master the Quran, that is the fact that they could master many different fields of knowledge, because the Quran, the spirit of the Quran, of course, is tawhidic, and the spirit of the Quran is for us to seek knowledge, and the spirit of the Quran is very much hands-on in terms of gaining knowledge, and that's where the empirical science came from. The West got inspired to do empirical science from Muslims, and Muslims were inspired to do empirical science from the understanding of the Quran. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always draw our attention to this science in nature. And to travel the world and see for yourself, right? So all of these are practical things. Now, in the past, during the Greek era, there was only theory, no praxis. So scientists at that time were philosophers. They only speculate. They don't do things, yeah? As an illustration, I think I did mention this in our several sessions before, that Aristotle, if I'm not mistaken, said that, of course, in the Greek understanding, in the Greek mythology, women were not fully human. Women were half human. They're like demons, right? Because men cannot live without women, but then they don't want to acknowledge that they are dependent upon women because, they are macho, so label them as demon and label some of them as witches. So because they were half human, they were demons, they did not have the same number of teeth like men. They have less number of teeth than men.
Really?
That was speculated by Aristotle. Could Aristotle check if he did believe in praxis? There was no praxis back then. It was just theory. Science was just speculation. You speculate, dhann, yeah, without proving. And in our tradition, there's one ayah say, you when a news come to you, tabayyun. Yes. And you cannot just depend on dhann. You have to prove to yourself. That's why travel there. Right? So now Aristotle said that women had lesser teeth than men. Could he check it simply, quickly? Do you think that he could? Was it possible for him to check to verify whatever that he had said, that women had lesser number of teeth? Was it checkable?
Sure.
Yeah, very easy, right?
Yeah, easy.
Honey, could you please open your mouth? Let me count. But that wasn't done. So in the past, the West was in the dark ages because they didn't do any praxis. It was just theory. That's number one. Number two, because of the Christianization of the Greek mythology of geocentricity, that the earth is a place for punishment. It doesn't need to be developed. It's a place for sinners, because we are all sinners. Then the world did not develop. But then they got inspired when they finally found out that Muslim lands were developed. Right? So then they began to develop, because in their mind, there was no science. That's why the West was in the dark. At the same time, Muslims were at the height of their civilization. So why did I get here? I think it's in response to your question. The key thing for me to rejuvenate that kind of scenario that you mentioned is to go back to the Quran with a true understanding. Yeah. So my children are all big. I hope my grandchildren will master the Quran. Your children still have time. Yeah. So, and your children too, inshallah, once you are married. Inshallah. That's a very good question, but my answer may not be answering all, but I think the key is that. And of course, today's education also is at fault, because today's education, at least in this part of the world, it emphasizes on memorization without understanding. And students, in the face of the national examinations, most of them were trained, drilled with past year questions. If the question is like this, you answer like this. The question like that, you answer like this. Not really to understand the subject matter. And then come questions that never appeared in the past years. Then the student will come to the teacher, teacher, today our question, we never did that in the past year question. I mean, we are drilling the students to memorize the question and memorize the way in answering certain questions. That's not education. Education is to make the students understand that, something. I want to share my experience. I love additional mathematics. Additional mathematics is higher mathematics. Most people hate additional mathematics, but alhamdulillah, I had a good teacher, and I love learning. So I used to try to understand. The book of this additional mathematics was like smaller than this, but twice as thick. I studied from cover to cover. And my teacher was so good. I can still remember his name, Mr. Howe, I think so. Very thin fella. And I understood why we did this step, why we did this step, why we did this step. So I did not have to memorize the different formulas. I just memorized one formula from that formula because I understood I could derive the formulas myself. But that's not the way students are taught today. Yeah. You memorize. How much can we memorize? Of course, the Quran you should memorize. But, other things you should understand. And when you understand, you know what's going on. And then when you know what's going on, you get motivation. And when you get motivation, you love learning. When you love learning, you put in your effort. When you put in your effort, the A's come. So that's the key, I think. Yeah. The way that we are drilling our students, that's not learning. We are, like training them, like in the Olympics, training them to get this question answered this way. So, how many past year questions for the past 10 years, for the past 20 years, they would do paper by paper by paper by paper. I know, I used to do that also. And I used to have to do that to my students also because the parents want that. So now I'm outside of it, that I can speak. All right, so that's the response to your question. Any other question? Even people online? Some of them have gone out already.
Okay.
Yes, brother.
My observation, I just want to raise an observation. Based on my perspective, we cannot put all the blame on the West.
Yes.
Because they are doing it with a malicious intention, but still, we as a Muslim, we are talking about our past.
Right.
If we are still consistent on those efforts, we will be able to
reclaim,
write our own history also.
Yes, yes,
So
I agree with you.
They are the one that are giving that aspect attention. So people are learning it from them. That's why they can tell them that this is from this source.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Secondly, I think there should be a work on several common theories from the Western. There should be a work to check, to verify the sources. But we start from the major one. There should be a work that we want to verify all the sources, because those that we have mentioned now, they are not the only one. There are many. So we should verify everything so that we can know the real source. If it is from there, we should acknowledge. And if it is from the Muslim world,
we should acknowledge.
Yes.
Yeah, I totally agree, because that's what I said. Thanks to postmodernism, because postmodernism has this
deconstruction,
total skepticism of everything. Why? Because again, the history of the West, how the Bible has been, how the church has been behaving, how their priests have been behaving, these are all historical. So to the point that they don't trust any authority. So they become skeptical. Because they become skeptical, because modern history had been written biased. Modern science had been written biased. Because of all these biases, they now are skeptical of everything. So they deconstruct, and they want to reconstruct. On what is the premise of their reconstruction? And that's the topic of another discussion. But the point is they deconstructed. When they deconstructed, they saw the errors. And they discovered what you are talking about just now. They discovered the actual sources. So thanks to postmodernism, and I agree with you, it's not 100% the fault of the West. Of course, we have fault also. And part of the fault is what I discussed just now, which is we don't master the Quran.
Yeah.
We don't master the Quranic language. And then we don't promote thinking in our students. We just promote them to memorize. Even in our exams, students like exam, I tell you. They don't like projects, because exams, they just memorize and it's quickly done, finished. And I ask my students in their first year, because I teach first year, second year students, what did you learn during your high school? Madam, we have done the exam and then we have passed, we forgot. Because when they memorize, it's just for exam purpose, exam is done, they don't remember. Halas, they don't learn anything. So with our current situation, we are creating followers. We're not creating leaders. Yeah. And Muslims are followers, right? Even in the cause of fighting Palestine, you see the social media feeds. Many of the feeds are from the West, not from us. We are just forwarding. Yesterday, I found one very compelling feed by a female talking about what is happening, and maybe I'll share it with you because I have to search. It's very compelling, and I have been following ever since this genocide is happening. I open, and most of the things that are response from people, of course, that journalist Mehdi, what's his name? Mehdi something. He's a journalist. He used to be working with the main news channel, but now he's independent. Mehdi Hassan. Mehdi Hassan is good. He's a Muslim. The way that he analyzes things. And even the comedian, The surgeon turned into comedian. Can't remember his name. I remember his face. He also has good content. But other than this, mostly Western content. And we forward. So I agree with you 100%, brother. So we as fathers, mothers, teachers, we have to make sure that our students learn and understand.
Yeah.
We have to learn, get them to learn and understand. It's okay if we go slow. It's okay if we, sorry, there's any administrator here, cannot finish the syllabus. Important thing is that you inspire them, they learn, the rest they can learn themselves. But if you have to finish the syllabus, run through it, nobody understand anything, they just memorize, then you're not getting anything. Allahu A'lam. That's my response. Okay, it's already 4:35. Soon it would be Adhan. And I think most of the people have left except a few. Oh, yes, please.
Okay, just want to add, maybe just what I learned from the Islamization class yesterday with Prof. Hassan. He said about like humans are become more like AI, becoming like more like a machine, and AI is wants to become human. That is what happened right now. Like we remember and we forget things. Like AI, we feed it with data, with language until it becomes a large language model, and then yeah, that's all about AI. But once we feed it more and more, it becomes more human, and the human who feeds the knowledge to the AI becomes more like a machine.
I think not the human that feed the knowledge, the human that are accessing the AI, depending on the AI, they are becoming like machine. They can't even use their mind anymore.
Yeah.
At least we have effort to feed information onto the AI. Yeah, that's slightly better. But here, the consumers of AI, they are becoming more like machine.
It becomes somehow it is meant to be constructive technology. Sometimes it becomes a destructive one
if it's not used properly.
Yeah.
So students, if you use just AI to submit your assignment, you haven't learned anything. I know there are students there. As I said early in the semester, even if you have to use AI, perhaps to correct your language, perhaps to give indication what to look for, it's okay. But if you 100% submit AI's work, I guess the AI should get the certificate, right? All right, that's all the time that we have today. Thank you very much for the very good discussion that we have here and for the attendance of people online as well as here in this room. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. Whatever that is good is from Allah, whatever that is not is from us and from me. And I ask Allah to forgive me. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. وإياكم. All right, alhamdulillah.